So luckily, this story doesn't involve me being chased, almost kidnapped, or anything like that. But it is one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me. I think about what happened from time to time, and sometimes I feel as though I may be overreacting. But then I remember how much I felt like my stomach was in my throat, and my heart was going to burst out of my chest, and I know that my fear was justified. I never told my parents or the parents of the kids I was babysitting, which looking back was probably really stupid. This happened when I was about 14. I had just started babysitting for this family in my neighborhood. They had 2 kids, a boy who at the time was 10, and a girl who at the time was 8. They were great kids to babysit. They got along with each other without fighting, and always did what I asked of them without complaining. Before I launch into what happened, I'm gonna give y'all some background information about this family's house, so y'all can understand why I was so freaked out. The house is situated pretty far back in my neighborhood, on this little side street off the main road that runs through the neighborhood. The house is in a cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot of traffic on this road at all. Usually, the only people that ever come into the cul-de-sac are the mailman and the people who lived in the other 3 houses that were there. The street itself was not very long at all, so there were only 3 houses on each side of the street that weren't in the cul-de-sac. Essentially, despite being in a large neighborhood, the street that this house was situated on was very quiet, and if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you might not even know that this street even existed. It was a fall Friday night. Pretty sure it was late November, right after Thanksgiving, and I arrived at the house around 6 p.m. The kids were already sitting down eating dinner when I got there, and the parents told me that they expected to be home around midnight or so. The parents also made a joke about how the kids had the whole street to themselves, since the other families that lived there were mostly out of town for Thanksgiving. The parents left, the kids finished eating, and we went outside to go play in the street. I remember locking the front door and taking the house key outside with me. The kids rode around on their scooters for about an hour. For some reason, though, I just felt really on edge while the kids were playing outside. I tried to chalk this up to a feeling of knowing that we were alone on the street since everyone else was out of town. After the kids finished playing outside, we went back in to play some Wii in the basement. I remember locking the front door once we were back inside and putting the key on the kitchen counter. I then double-checked the front door again before I went downstairs into the basement. I was super vigilant about checking the doors because I had watched so many scary movies where the babysitter forgets to lock the door and then some crazy murderer gets into the house. As the kids are playing in the basement, I get that unsettling feeling again. I didn't feel like we were being watched. It was more like when you know that something is going to pop out in a scary movie, and you're just anticipating it on the edge of your seat. And the feeling sticks with me the entire time that we're in the basement, but again, I chalk it up to knowing that the entire street is empty. The clock strikes 10, and it's time for the kids to head to bed. We go to the top floor of the house where the kids' bedrooms are. And the house is set up so that when you open the front door of the house and come inside, you're standing in the foyer with the stairs to go to the top of the floor directly in front of you. If you're standing in the foyer, you can see all the way up the stairs into the bathroom on the top floor. So the kids are in the bathroom brushing their teeth, and we all hear a car pull into their driveway. I figure that it's their parents coming home super early, and I expect to hear the garage doors start opening. But that sound never comes. I walk into the girl's bedroom and look out her front window. There's a car running in the driveway, and there's a man in the car but the headlights are turned off, despite it being 10 p.m. and pitch black dark outside. I figured maybe it was someone who got lost in our neighborhood and was just using the driveway to stop and get their bearings before heading back out onto the road. I leave the girl's bedroom and head back into the bathroom where the kids are. Suddenly, I hear a knock on the front door. I turn around, and there's a man standing at their door holding a pizza box. There are 2 long windows on either side of their front door, so I have a very clear view of this guy, and I know that he has a clear view of us. I immediately get that eerie feeling that I had been feeling all night. I asked both of the kids if they ordered a pizza for some reason, and they both say no. These kids were always very honest, and wouldn't lie about something like that, or even order a pizza without asking me, so I knew right away they were being truthful. Normally, I would have gone downstairs to see what this guy wanted. Maybe he had the wrong house and I could point him in the right direction. But that little voice in my head was screaming, "Don't go downstairs. Don't open that door." The guy also didn't look like he worked for any pizza company I knew. Normally they would be wearing a uniform or a hat with the company's logo on it or something. This guy just seemed off. He looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s and looked super disheveled. His shirt was really wrinkled and his pants were filthy and ripped, and he had this ratty black baseball cap that was pulled down super far so that his eyes were covered. He was also grinning really aggressively, like I thought this guy's teeth would just shatter because of how hard he was pressing them together. At this point, the kids notice him and start asking why he's here, should we open the door, and things like that. I tell them no, and ask that they just go to their rooms and lie down. The boy goes to his room, and I walk the girl into her room and look out the window at the car again. I notice that the car doesn't have one of those pizza delivery car signs on the top, which all of the pizza companies in my town require delivery drivers to have. So now I feel really confident in my initial intuition that this guy isn't a legit pizza delivery guy. And the girl gets in bed, and I come back out of our room and sit down at the top of the stairs so that I can keep an eye on this weird guy. I tried to stay really calm so as to not upset the kids, even though I was flipping out on the inside. He's still standing at the door, holding the pizza box in one hand, and he's still grinning that teeth-shattering grin. His mouth looks almost too big for his face. Even though I can't see his eyes because of the hat, I know that he's dead-ass staring at me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he starts jiggling the door handle pretty aggressively while still grinning. I silently thank God that I was so psychotic about making sure the front door was locked. He stops jiggling the handle and resumes his staring. If I was in this situation now, I probably would have called the police immediately, but being only 14 and fairly new to babysitting, I was paralyzed with fear. I felt like if I took my eyes off him for even a second, when I looked back he would be standing at the base of the stairs. After about another 5 minutes of the stare down, he literally starts walking backwards off their porch without breaking eye contact. Legit, this dude was walking backwards towards his car while staring at me. I go into the parents' bedroom, which also has a view of the driveway, kneel down in front of the window, and peek out. I'm expecting to see this guy getting into his car, but no. The guy is now nowhere in sight, but the car is still there. I return to my perch at the top of the stairs, half expecting to see him at the door again, or worse, standing at the bottom of the stairs, but he was nowhere to be seen. After about 20 minutes, I hear a car starting finally. I run back to the parents' room, kneel in front of the window again, and notice that the car in the driveway has started, and the guy is sitting in the driver's seat still fucking grinning. He also doesn't turn the headlights on. He shifts into reverse and begins slowly backing out of the driveway, grinning the entire time. Right before he drove off, he turns his head, and I swear to God makes direct eye contact with me. Again, I can't really see his eyes because of the hat, but somehow I knew he was looking at me. This is really disturbing to me, since he didn't really know where I was in the house. The parents' bedroom is the farthest window to the right if you're looking at the house from outside. The lights in the parents' bedroom are off, and I'm kneeling down, so really the only part of me that might be potentially visible is the top of my head, my eyes, or my nose. It's also pitch black outside though, and he doesn't have his headlights on, so I doubt that I was visible. It's almost like he could sense where I was. After I had time to calm down and collect myself, I started replaying what had happened and came to the following conclusions. This guy was not a pizza delivery guy. He had no uniform, looked and acted like he was possessed or something, and his car was unmarked. Those 20 minutes or so that had elapsed between when he walked backwards off the front porch to when he got into the car were probably spent walking around the house and checking all of the doors trying to gain entry. he had malicious intent. Maybe he wanted to rob the house, or maybe he wanted to do something more sinister to me or the kids. Either way, this guy was bad news, and I'm glad that I trusted the voice in my head. There are still some parts of the story that are confusing to me. If he really wanted to get inside the house, why didn't he just find a rock or a brick and throw it through a window? I mean, I'm very glad he didn't, but I just thought it was a bit odd that he checked the doorknobs, then gave up after he discovered they were all locked. Maybe he felt like doing something like that made a lot of noise and would alert me, so he was trying to sneak in a more subtle way. Or maybe he was just insane. Why did I feel so unsettled early in the evening, before the guy even showed up? Was he watching the house and waiting for the kids to go to bed, and for me to be off guard before trying to get in? How did he know where to look when he was backing out of the driveway? Why did he pick this house? Especially given the fact that it's on a very quiet and secluded street, and you have to drive pretty far back in the neighborhood to even reach it. He could have picked the 50 or so other houses that you have to pass to even get to that house. The town where I live is upper middle class, and has a super low crime rate, so drugs aren't really an issue. We're also surrounded by other similar middle class areas, so I'm doubtful that this person was on drugs or some crazy vagrant. Of course, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe he was just a vagrant dude, or maybe he really was a lost pizza delivery man with some unsettling personal quirks, but I'm doubtful. Let me know what y'all think was up with this guy. I never told my parents or the parents of the kids, which, as I said, was a stupid idea. I definitely should have told someone about it. If he was really watching their house, they definitely needed to know. So I'm a male nurse at a large hospital in San Francisco. I work in the ER, and as custom on Thanksgiving night, it was very busy. Now my wife is also a nurse for the same hospital. She works in labor and delivery. Between babies being born left and right, and people coming into the ER, we hadn't had a chance to take a break together as we try to do every shift. So when she called, I figured it was to say she wanted to meet up for a bite to eat in the cafeteria. When I answered, I heard in the background a male voice screaming profanities, and my wife, who was fluent in Spanish, trying to calm this guy down. She told me their pager wasn't working, and they needed security stat. I quickly hung up and called for security, told my fellow nurses what was going on, and ran for labor and delivery, worried sick about my wife. That's where I ran almost smack dab into this visibly angry man. He wasn't huge, but the bro definitely worked out and not at the gym. He was covered in prison tattoos, and he was obviously a banger. I work out regularly, but I knew this guy could kick my ass. He looked at me, gave me this sick grin, and started heading towards me, sprouting off in Spanish. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but what I could understand scared the living shit out of me. I'm backing up as fast as I can. I start buzzing the door to the ER frantically for them to let me in. And this guy's literally a foot away from me, and the door opens and I'm pulled into safety by a doctor. Gangbanger punches the door a few times, making a dragging sign across his throat while grinning at us both. The next thing I know, the police rush into the corridor he's in, and it takes 2 security officers and 2 cops to subdue this dude. I finally make it to my wife, who thankfully was shaken up but unhurt. She explains to me what happened. A young girl, only 14, came in. High fever, vomiting, distended belly. The banger claimed he was her brother, and that they needed to cut her open to get her baby. They did an ultrasound, and to their horror realized she wasn't pregnant. She had bags of drugs in her stomach. It's very common for drug mules to bring over young women from Mexico carrying drugs that way. Homeboy freaked out when they mentioned his sister needed emergency surgery, and no, he wasn't getting his drugs. Thankfully, the girl survived, but the sad thing is, she'll most likely be deported once she recovers. I'm a proud Floridian. At the time of this story, early 2000s, I was going to college in South Florida and lived with my family in my hometown in the Florida Panhandle. It's about a 7-hour drive up through central Florida to get between the two places, so I mostly only went home for the holidays. It was the Thanksgiving of my junior year, and I was excited that I had managed to rearrange my midterms to be able to leave campus 3 days ahead of everyone else. I was expecting to beat the masses of traffic, and was hoping for a quick trip back home. My roommates wanted to have a last meal together before we all left for break, so I ate in the campus dining hall at around 4 p.m., and I set off on my journey around 5:30. Around 10 p.m., I had just passed my 2/3 mark, where I always stopped at this little mom-and-pop's type diner by the side of the highway to grab a snack, use the restroom, and maybe call my dad to let him know I was okay. Well, I hadn't been there since the summer, so the place was out of business. I was a little bummed out that I wasn't getting my chocolate chip pancakes, and I just kept going. There wasn't really much built up around there at that time, so when I saw signs for a rest stop in, of all places on God's green earth, some bumfuck town called Alachua, I went for it. I went and parked directly under the streetlight for safety, and used the facilities, called my dad, and everything like that. I didn't see anyone else there, except for a very exhausted-looking woman who approached me asking for directions, saying she was with her husband and 2 small children from Virginia, and they had made a wrong turn trying to get to Disney. I left the rest area and was walking back to my car, when I noticed a beat-up, unmarked gray or bluish work van parked this close to the driver's side of my '95 Honda Civic. Okay, I thought. That's pretty weird. It had Florida tags on it, so it couldn't have been the ladies I talked to in the bathroom. I distinctly remembered she said she was from out of state. I turned around and hightailed it back to the rest stop, promptly running into some random middle-aged guy with 2 little boys. Getting to talk to him, it turned out it was his wife I had spoken to, as she emerged from the bathroom a second later, and I felt pretty comfortable talking to him. I told him what was going on with the van, and how I didn't know what to do. He said he'd go check it out, so he left the kids with his wife and strutted up to the driver's side of the van. He stood there for a moment before speaking. His voice awkwardly quivered, but we could hear him yell it from where we were standing some 100 feet away. "Excuse me, gentlemen. We already called the police, so I'm going to have to politely suggest that you get out of here." And then he ran back to us, grabbed his wife and kids, pointed to me with a swift "you," and said, "Come on, let's all get in the car now." And we ran together. So here I was, confusedly sitting in the back of this stranger's SUV, while he went and used the payphone to presumably call the police. Meanwhile, the van peeled out of there. I've never seen someone get the fuck out of there quite as fast as that van. They ran up on the curb on their way out. They burned rubber. It was almost comical. The cops got there and I found out what happened. The man went to go check out the van, and he could see in it pretty well because I had parked under the streetlight. The first thing he noticed was that all of the seats except for the driver's seat had been removed. There was a guy sitting in the driver's seat, and a guy sitting in the back, a tarp laid out in the back, and a bunch of other random items back there that he couldn't immediately identify. Neither of the guys were reading a newspaper or a map or anything. They were apparently both just sitting there, waiting for me. It still makes me sick thinking about it. Bear with me, as I'm not the greatest writer. This all took place in November of last year. I booked an entire trip in order to propose to my then-girlfriend. Flew us both out to Florida to go to Disney World, the last concert of one of our favorite bands, Amberlin, and, of course, propose. We had a blast. I proposed in the Disney castle. She said yes, and everything went pretty well. We took off the next morning. Thanksgiving Day, on the way home, connecting through San Francisco. About 30 minutes into the flight, the captain comes on the intercom and announces that one of the engines wasn't depressurizing properly. We do a loop back to the airport and get unloaded into the terminal as we wait for another plane to be readied. When we got up to the terminal, my now fiancée switched her phone back from airplane mode, and within a minute she had 10 plus voicemails, all from the same number which she didn't know. Fearing the worst, we called the number without listening to any of the voicemails. I knew something was wrong as soon as she started talking to them. Her face went blank, and she didn't say a word. I told her to give me the phone, and she did. I asked who it was, and the voice I heard back just sounded dead, absolutely no hint of emotion in it. All he said was, "I will kill you both as soon as you land in Seattle." I asked who he was again, and he just hung up. She said she had no idea who it was, and I certainly didn't know the voice. I called him back, and he would answer, and just repeat the time that we were landing. Little did he know we were delayed by hours. I used to work in telecom, and I pulled some strings to get a name and address from the phone number that he used. Neither of us knew the name, nor the address. She looked him up on Facebook, and she had one mutual friend with him, her ex-best friend, we'll call her Karen, that she was no longer friends with, as she got wrapped up in heavy drug usage and stole from my fiancé. We did a little more digging, and found out that he was the boyfriend of Karen's new best friend. My theory is Karen saw all the posts that my fiancé was posting on social media about the trip, the engagement, and the great time we were having, and she was pissed, and wanted to piss on our parade. I didn't take it as a joke, however. A death threat is a death threat, and in my mind, as meth heads, they could follow through with it on a whim. I called him and talked over his rambling, and told him I was armed, knew where he lived, and was not afraid to take things into my own hands. He hung up on me, so I called the Seattle area law enforcement, and they told me to call back on a non-holiday. I called the emergency line, and they reiterated the same statement. We were on our own. We ended up flying in close to 9 hours after our original arrival time. Once we landed, we both had a single voicemail. Hers, I assumed, was from the guy. Mine, I had no idea, as he hadn't been calling my phone. My voicemail was from my dad, who said he had gotten a call from my neighbor saying that my mailbox had been destroyed. Looked like it had been hit by a car and the mail stolen from it. Her voicemail, however, was the guy screaming, "Where are you? How dare you?" and plenty of other threats and random yelling. I drove home and dropped my fiancé off at her house, insisting she not come with me to my place in case there was someone still there. They threw a brick through my window with an old picture of my fiancé and Karen attached to it. I tried calling him to no answer. I went to bed after covering up the window with a tarp and making sure my fiancé was okay. I filed a police report the next day. They said I couldn't do anything without seeing them on my property. We blocked everyone involved on social medias and tried to go about our lives. I didn't hear from him for 3 weeks when he sent me a picture of my fiancée working. I immediately called her and told her to go in the back of her work, a bubble tea shop. I then called mall security and explained the situation, but by the time they got to the food court where the picture was taken from, he was long gone. At this point I was done messing around. I knew his address, and stopped by and dropped off a note attached to a critical defense .40 caliber bullet, saying, "This is your last chance to leave her alone. This is your only warning." It's been almost 9 months now. Haven't seen or heard a word from them again. But for both our sakes, I sincerely hope not to meet you, Tyler. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys like the video, please feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback or suggestions for stories you'd like to see, or anything like that, be sure to leave a comment below, because I always read all of the comments. I have a pretty big update for the channel for you guys. So, as you guys probably know, things have been pretty rough lately for the YouTube horror narrator community. Basically on YouTube, a bunch of advertisers pulled out, and now everybody is getting way less returns on their views and everything like that. So I wanted to announce that I finally set up a Patreon account where you guys can donate and contribute to the channel if you like. Of course, it's never necessary. None of my content will ever be necessary to be paid for or anything like that. Basically, what Patreon is it's just a tip jar for artists if you feel like supporting them. Of course, if you don't have the money or anything like that, please don't feel like you have to or anything. It's just there for people who want to. So I'll be leaving a link to that in the description of the video, and also probably in a comment with the timestamps for stories for this video. Please give me feedback on what you guys think about that. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I hope it will go over well. And I hope you guys understand why I'm doing that. If you'd like to contact me, or if you have any stories you'd like to send in or that you'd like me to read, please be sure to take a look in the description of the video below. There will be links to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the header of the email, or whatever you choose to send, what the title of the story is, what the theme of the story is, if it has any, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the music used at all in this video, the music is always in the description below, in the order which it appears in the video, and I also leave links to the artists themselves in case you like their music and would like to give them support and check out more of their work. And of course, if you have any constructive criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.